Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna min fadlika 'ilman wa ta'lima innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. We are here in the 10th lesson of Imam Ghazali's Ayyuha walad, dear beloved son, explained, advice for living right. And the title of this lesson is 4 things to desist from. If you remember, Imam Ghazali, let's just retrace our steps. We're coming to the end of the letter now of Imam Ghazali to one of his senior students, who he refers to as dear son, dear child. And even though he must be a senior person. And he's saying the last portion of this letter is that let me give you 8 pieces of advice, nasiha. And he says, take it from me so that your knowledge will not be a proof against you on the day of judgment, right? And he's saying you should do 4 things and leave 4 things. And then he says the 4th, that I'm going to start with what you should leave. And if you remember, he said, and of the 4 things that you should leave, what was the first advice that he gave? Right? The first advice that he gave, if you remember, is do not debate anyone on any matter as much as you are able to. If you remember that, do not debate anyone on any matter as much as you are able to. And then we talked a little bit about the aspect of debate. What does it do? It brings a lot of blameworthy character traits out, showing off, envy, pride, enmity, things like this. And then, what happens is, however, there is a need sometimes to debate. He's not saying never, ever, ever debate. He's just saying stay away from it as much as you can. However, there are conditions. If you want to debate for the sake of haqq, the truth, then it's lawful. And the sign of true debate, if you remember, was that you don't care whether the truth is revealed on your tongue or on the tongue of your opponent, what you would call the opponent. But it shouldn't be an opponent, really, right? And then also, that you prefer private inquiry more than public inquiry. So instead of saying, all right, me versus you, truth versus falsehood, let's debate this in front of a stadium full of people. You would much rather solve the problem by saying, hey, give me a phone call. Let's go for coffee. Let's talk about it. Why? Because it's more likely to have sincerity. When you disagree with someone and it's a private disagreement, you're more likely to stay within sincerity. And so refraining from debate, right? Let's see from where Imam Ghazali picks up. So we left off, and he said, Isma. He says, listen up. Inni adhkuru laka huna fa'ida. He says, I'm going to mention something on this first point still, this first idea of do not debate. I'm going to mention a very beneficial thing to you. اعلم أن السؤال عن المشكلات عرض مرض القلب إلى الطبيب. He says that asking a question about problematic issues is like showing a sickness of the heart to the doctor. Whenever you ask a question to a scholar about, it must be problematic. When they mean problematic, they don't mean it's a problem. They mean when you problematize something, you're wondering how to solve a certain discrepancy in your mind, or you don't know something and you're bringing that to someone who knows. When you ask a question to a scholar, it's like revealing a sickness of yours to a doctor. That's why do you go to visit a doctor? When you're sick, right? And so the same thing, you go to a scholar, you go and you send in a question, or you go to ask them a question, and وَالْجَوَابْ لَهُ سَعْيٌ لِإِصْلَاحِ مَرَضِهِ. And when that scholar is answering you, right, the answer from that scholar is just like a doctor working towards curing a sickness. So that doctor gets to work in helping you, in trying to treat you. And then he says, وَعْلَمْ, and know this, أَنَّ الْجَاهِلِينَ الْمَرْضَى قُلُوبُهُمْ وَالْعُلَمَاء الْأَطِبَّاء. And just know this, that ignorant people have a sickness of the heart, right? It's like a person who has a sickness of the heart. So he likens ignorance to a sickness. And scholars are like doctors, meaning they're the ones who are supposed to treat that situation, right? Why? Because ignorance is likened to a sickness, because when a person is ignorant of something, then they may have some type of deficiency in their deen, or in their understanding, or in how they give rights to other people. And so it's a problematic situation. Just like, and we're talking about ignorance of things that matter, i.e. deen. We're not talking about like ignorance like you haven't memorized all of the presidents of the United States. So, it's okay to know. It's good to know. But we're talking about, that's not going to harm you, whether you know it or you don't know it. Alhamdulillah, if you know history and these things. But what harms you is when you don't know something that will benefit you in the akhirah, or something that you have to do for the akhirah. So then he continues and he says, so the scholars, so let's look at this analogy. And throughout this analogy, he's going to keep using ignorance as a sickness, and the questioner as like a patient, and the scholar like a doctor. He says, وَالْعَالِمُ النَّاقِص لَا يُحْسِنُ الْمُعَالَجَةِ. He says the deficient scholar, a deficient scholar is not adept at treating hearts. النَّاقِص لَا يُحْسِنُ الْمُعَالَجَةِ. Okay, now what is he saying here? He's trying to explain something to this scholar, that not just everyone who ascribes himself to knowledge or has studied a little bit is necessarily ready to answer every type of question. And what he's saying is, this is a situation where, just like a doctor who has not, let's say, completed their studies, they haven't trained yet fully, they haven't specialized in something, you wouldn't trust them to treat a case or a disease or medicate or operate in a situation that they don't know how to deal with. Why? Because it's likely, right? It's likely that they'll make a mistake. So your podiatrist, might know things about feet and stuff, but you wouldn't ask him to do dental surgery on you. And this is why that doctor would not be the one capable of doing that. And so a deficient scholar is not adept at treating hearts. They don't know. But there's also, not only is there the metaphor, but there's also the idea. They have a saying. And forgive me if I butcher the Urdu, but it's what is it? Neem Hakim Khatra Jan and Neem Molvi Khatra Iman. Have you heard this? No? So that's what I think it is. Basically, it's saying like, that a half-baked doctor is a threat to your life, but a half-baked scholar is a threat to your iman. So a scholar that is not able to treat you, and you ask them a question that implies that you need something, then that is even more dangerous than going to a doctor that doesn't know what they're doing. And no one would ever want to go to a doctor that doesn't know what they're doing, right? So, and subhanAllah, even worse than going to a professional sometimes, it's funny, is, if you had a serious issue, you wouldn't just treat yourself through Google, right? Like, we shouldn't be. And yet for religious reasons, people do it all the time. They do it all the time. They can ask a scholar very easily, and yet when it comes to, asking a question, you'll see somebody on like a Reddit forum or something like that, or like, Instagram kind of like put it out there, what's the answer to this question? If it, when there are sources to be able to go to, even on the internet, right? Obviously we have answers, we have the answer service and so on. And the other thing that might happen is that a scholar who is not adept at treating hearts, an answer from such a person may do a number of things to the patient, right? And to the ignorant person. First of all, the information may just be wrong, in which case they practice in an incorrect way, and they then are not able to. They don't know that part of their deen. They do something wrong for their entire lives or something like that. Fasting wrong, praying wrong, whatever it is. Or they give them an answer that is not according to the hikmah that you should be using with that person. And so this talib, this questioner, this sa'il, gets a response, but it actually gives them a doubt, or they can't understand, or they can't understand it. Or the other thing is that the answer is given in such a way that they get waswasa. So this happens as well. One of the things that our teacher taught us is that when someone who is not capable or fit to be a teacher teaches, because of some reason, the sign of it is that the students have waswasa. The students get a waswasa. And so this is what Imam Ghazali is talking about, and some of the things, may Allah save us and protect us from being on either side of this issue. And then he says, وَالْعَالِمُ الْكَامِلُ لَا يُعَالِجُ كُلَّ مَرِيدٍ. He goes, but a complete scholar, a perfect scholar, does not treat every sick patient. So a deficient scholar cannot treat people properly, but a complete scholar doesn't even try to treat everyone properly. That's interesting. Why wouldn't he try to treat everyone? بل يعالج من يرجو فيه قبول المعالجة والصلاح. Rather, the complete scholar, they only treat those in whom he hopes will accept, or in whom he hopes will accept the treatment and improvement. So he's like, you know what? He's looking at this patient and he's saying, can I do this job? A surgeon is looking and saying, can I do the operation? If I can do it, I will take the case. I will take it. Otherwise, the doctor says, I'm not going to take the case. I can't do it. Right? Or he's saying, for whatever reason, it's not going to work on you. And this is why he's saying, then he says, وَإِذَا كَانَتِ الْعِلَّةُ مُزْمِنَةً أو عقيما لا تقبل العلاج فحذاقة الطبيب فيه أن يقول هذا لا يقبل العلاج فلا يشتغل بمداواته لأن فيه تضييع العمر. So he says, if the illness is terminal or incurable, or like the illness makes you incapacitated, and he says, and it's intreatable, it's incurable, then the intelligent doctor, from his own sense and experience, will not get busy in medicating this person, because it is a waste of his lifetime to do so. So if he knows, look, this is not going to help, the disease is such that it's not going to go away. Same with the ignorance. A scholar that knows that my answering this person's questions, my teaching this person, is not going to remove their ignorance for a number of reasons. Then Imam Ghazali is saying, if you a complete scholar doesn't even try, because his lifetime is valuable, and he doesn't try to waste his lifetime in something that's not going to produce a result for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. Because it's not just about intention. Intention, of course, he'll get that reward, but he's also looking at what the effective outcome is. And if he does not think that there's going to be a good resolution, then there's no point in even answering that person's question. That's very interesting. People often think, oh no, answer everyone's question. No matter what, work with them. See. And in reality, there are different types of people, as Imam Ghazali will speak about. And this is not an issue of sincerity necessarily, but it's in whether that person really wants to accept the answer or not, many times. So Imam al-Ghazali continues. He says, ثُمَّ أَعْلَمْ. Then know this, أَنَّ مَرْضَ الْجَهْلِ عَلَى أَرْبَةِ أَنْوَاعٍ. That the disease of ignorance is of 4 types. So the disease of ignorance is of 4 different types. أَحَدُهَا يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ. The first type of patient, right? The first type of person who has the disease of ignorance will respond to treatment. That's the first of the 4. وَالْبَاقِي لَا يَقْبَلُ. And the other 3 types of people. So one type of person will accept the treatment, meaning it'll work on them. Then 3 types of people, the treatment will not work on them. Meaning you answer one person's question, they will understand, they will benefit from that knowledge. There are 3 types of people, however, that will not, even if you answer their question, they will not benefit from that answer. They will not get it. What is it? أَمَّا الَّذِي لَا يَقْبَلُ. As for that person who does not respond to the treatment, meaning accept, understand the answer. فَأَحَدُهَا. The first of those 3 types of people who you cannot get, they will not get the right answer. They will not understand it. من كان سؤاله واعتراضه عن حسد وبغض. The first type of person who doesn't respond is when their questions or their objections are from envy or hatred. Right? And this is a serious thing. If someone comes asking a question, what does that mean? There's someone, this happens sometimes, they see a scholar from a different group, or a scholar that disagrees with their opinion, or they see a scholar that's popular or very pious or very knowledgeable, and because that scholar is from a different group of people, a different community, a different whatever, or does not agree with one's own scholar, what do? Sometimes they get a jealousy for that person, or they get a hatred for that person, dislike. I don't like, and you hear this, unfortunately. Some people talk bad about sheikhs on the internet. And it's like, what did he do? What did he do to you? Oh, he's so popular on YouTube. I don't know why people listen to him. Okay, what's your problem? Oh, he believes in this, and it's some difference of opinion or something like that. He got something wrong. Or, he's doing well, giving dawah. People are listening. He's effective with youth, whatever it is. And because of one thing he said, people hate on him, right? Or her. And they don't like that. Or it could be envy. So between two teachers or two scholars, they see that this person is gaining popularity. Their circle is growing bigger than this person's circle. How come this guy got an invite to the conference? I didn't get an invite to that conference, right? This person is speaking at this place, and look, every night when they do their live sessions on YouTube or whatever it is live, they get this many viewers. I get this many viewers. This person is a good speaker. So the shaitan plays, and envy comes into the person's heart, and then they speak bad about them to their students and their followers, or their social media followers, and then they say, they kind of throw questions out there, and the common person takes those questions and starts attacking that scholar. That's envy and hatred. These things are very, very serious problems in our ummah. What is envy? Envy is when you feel, some people say jealousy as well. It's when you see a blessing that another person has and you wish that they lost that blessing. Or you wish they lost it and that you get it for yourself. Or you wish that you got it, right? So there's different definitions of envy, but the bottom line is basically you want them to lose their blessing and you want to gain the blessing for yourself. That's usually what it is, right? And this often becomes what does this come out of? Pride, because you think that you deserve something. Like, why didn't I get that? Am I any less than that person? Aren't I a good speaker? Aren't I a good whatever? And so you become jealous of that person, this scholar who's doing really well. And so people have this kind of rivalry that happens. Or a person gets jealous and says, how come this scholar is from this group that we don't agree with, and they're doing so well, they're giving good dawah, the kind of people are becoming Muslim through them, and our group, no one's doing that. Or our masjid is empty, their masjid is full, or whatever it is. Their videos are so cool, our videos are not cool, whatever it is. And this envy, where does it go back to? This envy is the very first thing that occurred, one of the first sins tied up with pride, which is from Iblis. The shaitan, the first thing he did was he envied Adam alayhi salam. He did not want to bow down to Adam alayhi salam. Why? Because he was jealous of him. How did Allah respect and honor him so much, and I didn't get this honor? How come Allah wants me to bow down to him? So it's pride and it's envy. Same thing happened with Cain and Abel, Habil and Qabil. Why? The children of Adam alayhi salam, when one brother killed the other brother, it was envy. How come Allah accepted your sacrifice and did not accept my sacrifice? So he killed him. Again, envy, the first murder, subhanAllah. And shaitan is still envious of us. Why? He's insanely jealous of us because Allah loves us. Because at the end of the day, he knows that us human beings, as imperfect as we are, and as broken as we are, as pathetic as we can be, Allah gives us a chance to get to know Him and to love Him. Allah sent us a messenger that He loved more than anything else. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so there's an importance, and that if we have a mountain of sins, we make tawbah, and Allah will forgive us. And Shaitan is jealous because he can't get that. His sin is now, that's it. He's not going to make a tawbah, and he knows where he's destined. And so this envy is something that eats up people. And this envy is something that is a serious problem, even in the state of knowledge and religion. Don't think that you get into religion and envy and jealousy stop. Now this is different, as the commentators say, from emulation, what they call ghibta. Ghibta is when you see a person with a good quality and you want to be like that person, but you don't want that person to lose their blessing. So this person recites good Quran. I want to recite Quran well. I don't want them to, na'udhu billah, I don't want them to stop. Or this person studied knowledge, I want to study knowledge too. This person gives charity, I want to do the same. So that's permissible, that's fine. Because that's how we have racing towards good deeds and competing for good qualities. But so when this person's questioned, so what they'll do now is there's a scholar, like it's a talk, and then at the end they're kind of like the disruptor. Put up a question, and it's a controversial question to get the other person in trouble, to get the scholar in trouble. They're just asking the question to record the answer, to go out in front of everybody and say, see what this sheikh says, see, or trap them. So this is when the question is from envy or hatred. And you're just trying to trip the person up. You don't have any reason why you want that question to be answered in an honest way, right? So that type of person, every time, so then he says, فَكُلَّمَا تُجِيبُهُ بِأَحْسَنِ الْجَوَابِ وَأَفْصَحِهِ وَأَوْضَحِهِ لَا يَزِيدُ لَهُ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا غَيْظًا وَحَسَدًا. He says, even every single time that you respond to that type of person, the jealous or hateful person, the hater, every time you respond to that person with the best answer, you gave him the most brilliant answer, the most eloquent answer, and the most crystal clear Islamic response through knowledge, the person, they don't accept it. It just increases them more in anger and in jealousy, right? So even with the best response, they only increase in anger and envy. And you see this. In fact, the more that you answer such a person's questions, the more feisty they become. The more they want to plan the next question and debate you and then take you down and try to nitpick that question. And to the point where they even start to make up things, lies and stuff like that, and trip you up. You see this, and it's really nasty. People disagreeing with each other for some type of hasad or something like that, and then they start picking on each other's Arabic language skills. Like, what does that have to do with the answer? Someone made a mistake in Arabic. Oh, how do you even know that when you can't even say this properly? Or they'll say, oh yeah, well, don't you associate with so-and-so who associates with so-and-so, and that's, so you're canceled. Or something silly like this. So even with the best response, you will never win and you will never educate that person. And so Imam Ghazali says, فَالطَّرِيقِ, then the best thing to do, basically the solution, أَلَّا تَشْتَغِلْ بِجَوَابِهِ. Do not busy yourself in responding, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, right? And the best thing is not to busy yourself in responding. فَيَنْبَغِي أَن تُعْرِضَ عَنْهُ. And you should turn away from that person. Turn away from that person. وَتَتْرُكُهُ مَعَ مَرْضِهِ. And leave him with his illness. Let that person be with their ignorance. كما قال الله تعالى فأعرض عمن تولى عن ذكرنا ولم يرد إلا الحياة الدنيا. And Allah says, so turn away from they who turn away from our remembrance, Allah says. Turn away from those people who turn away from our dhikr. And they do not want anything except this worldly life. Meaning they're not asking you to get closer to Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're just asking you to debate you. People come up to you. This is the classic case. Come up to you and, well, is this the one? No, okay. There's another one coming up, and it'll apply to that one. So that's what. So then the other one is, then Imam Ghazali says, so when you do not respond to this person, someone might think, oh no, I didn't do my job, and it's not true. Imam Ghazali is telling this scholar, don't waste your time with haters and your enviers. the best thing you can do is not respond to those people. So Shaykh, what do you think about this? So what do you think about this on social media to get them in trouble, to bring out an answer that no one's going to like? You just stay silent and you forget it. And turn away and leave that person with their illness. You leave them because their illness is not just their ignorance. It's the disease they have in their heart. What can you do for that person if they don't even know they have that? A scholar can't take that out from a person's heart. A scholar can't take out envy or hate from a person's heart, right? Imam Ghazali quotes the lines that is attributed to Abdullah ibn Mubarak in the Diwan of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahmatullahi, the great tabi'i scholar. إلا عداوة من عاداك عن حسدي كل العداوة قد ترجى إزالتها. It's a type of I tried to make a rhyming translation. For each type of enmity, there is a remedy, except when they hate due to envy and jealousy. Except if you switch it around. Except when they hate due to envy and jealousy, for every type of enmity, there is a remedy. So you can solve every type of hate, you can solve it. If it's hate because of some fight, you can cause peace between people. Let me give you a gift. Let me say sorry. Cause love between. If it's an enmity because of a real misunderstanding, just clarify it. If it's a person who hates you because of envy, what are you going to do? Are you going to give away, your knowledge to that person? How are you going to do that? Are you going to give them the thing that they're jealous about? No, you're not going to do that. So you can't get rid of it. Then Imam Al-Ghazali continues, وَالْحَسُودُ بِكُلِّ مَا يَقُولُ وَيَفْعَلْ يُوقِدُ النَّارَ فِي زَرْعِ عَمَلِهِ وَهُوَ غَافِلٌ. And the one who envies, that person, by every single thing he says and acts on of that envy, every biting remark, every act to send out bad information or forward embarrassing mistakes about that person, everything they do and say, they just light a fire. They are fueling a fire inside the field of their own good deeds, right? Because Allah, and they're not even aware of it. Why? كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Because the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, peace be upon him, said, الحسد يأكل الحسنات كما تأكل النار الحطب. الحسد يأكل الحسنات. Jealousy or envy consumes good deeds, just as a fire consumes firewood. Right? So the same way, what happens with when you have like dried firewood and tinder, and you put a match inside it, just in a very short time, you see everything start to get consumed in flames. Envy is like that, consumes one's good deeds. If a person has jealousy, now we're not talking about, like a jealousy that comes up in the heart. You can't really help it, but you don't act on it, and you certainly don't accept it. You say, astaghfirullah, that's jealousy. You see in your heart, a lady sees another lady, she's prettier than I am. A guy sees another guy, he's driving a nicer car. His wife is prettier than my wife, or something like that, something silly. And or even student of knowledge sees student of knowledge. This person studied more than me. You feel like, and then you say, shut up, nafs. That's hasad. Stop it. That type of person, they're not, neither are they acting on it, nor are they speaking it, nor are they affirming it or encouraging it. So that type of jealousy and envy, you put it down. But what about the envy that's allowed to just go and burn? Just like a match inside a bunch of straw and firewood. Just eventually just spreads everywhere. And all of your, and the better, the person that you envy, the better they do. The more followers they get, the more talks they give, the whatever it is. In deen, the more the envy consumes you. And this is why it's so strange. But scholars, name any scholar and they have enemies. The first time I heard this, I was really shocked. When one of the major scholars, senior scholars, when he mentioned my enemies, XYZ, and I was like, your enemies? Most normal people don't have enemies, right? Like, do you have enemies? We don't have enemies, right? Normal, especially religious people, usually don't have enemies. But I realized what was happening. He didn't mean that there's enmity on both sides. It means that just because he's in the place where he is, just because she is effective in community work, just because he is knowledgeable in deen, has a lot of students, whatever it is, they have enemies who are just following around, and their only purpose in life seems to be to like seek and destroy that person. They'll stand outside of their talks handing out flyers why this person is deviant. They will troll them on social media, things like that. And it's kind of died down now quite a bit. It used to be quite all the rage a number of years ago. I think it still might happen on social media. Allah protect us. And so this is why this envy consumes good deeds as fire consumes firewood, according to the Prophet ﷺ, because you start doing all these things that nullify all the good things that you've done. And this is why Imam Ghazali says, so he says, وَالثَّانِي, and then he says, and now, getting back to the second type of person, how do they respond to this disease? وَالثَّانِي, the second type of person who does not respond to the disease. So the first type of person who doesn't respond to the disease, meaning they do not accept the answer, is because of envy and hatred. The third type, أَن تَكُونَ عِلَّتُهُ مِنَ الْحَمَاقَةِ, the person whose illness or affliction is because of foolishness, stupidity. وَهُوَ أَيْضًا لَا يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ, and he or she cannot respond to treatment. What is an example of that? So, for example, let's read on a little bit. Okay. كما قال عيسى عليه السلام إني ما عجزت عن إحياء الموتى وقد عجزت عن معالجة الأحمق. He says the second type of person, the illness that they have of ignorance is caused by idiocy. They're foolish, and they will not accept treatment. Just like Isa alayhi salam says, according to this, what he's saying is that it is said that Jesus said, I have not been, I should put it this way, إني ما عجزت, I was not incapable of bringing the dead back to life. وقد عجزت عن معالجة الأحمق, but I was incapable of curing a foolish person. Allahu A'lam about the authenticity of that statement. But Isa alayhi salam was well known, for a miracle that Allah gave him by the power of Allah. That there was was it Lazarus, I believe? That they say he was a person who had died and he came back to life. That was one of the mu'jaza of Isa alayhi salam. He's saying, I can do that. That miracle Allah gave me to bring the dead back to life. But I cannot cure a foolish person of their foolishness. Meaning it's very difficult to get rid of it. And so what Imam Ghazali is implying is that you can try. If a person is foolish and they're asking questions, then it's not going to be very easy to remove that foolishness, even if it's not out of hate or envy. وَذَلِكَ رَجُلٌ يَشْتَغِلُ بِطَلَبِ الْعِلْمِ زَمَانًا. And this could be, what type of person is foolish when they mean foolish? It could be a man who actually has spent some time seeking knowledge, but it's only a very little time. زَمَانًا قَلِيلًا. This person spends a little bit of time seeking knowledge. وَيَتَعَلَّمْ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْعُلُومِ الْعَقْلِ وَالشَّرْعِ. And they learn something of the rational sciences and the transmitted revelatory sciences. Aqidah, fiqh, and hadith, Quran, tafsir, mantiq, different sciences. So they spent a little time doing talab al-ilm. Mind you, this is the person who they're calling ahmaq. وَهَذَا الْأَحْمَقْ لَا يَعْلَمْ. And still, they don't have sense and understanding of what the deen is about, or they don't have a knowledge about this. وَيَظُنُّ أَنَّ مَا أَشْكَلَ عَلَيْهِ هُوَ أَيْضًا مُشْكِلٌ لِلْعَالِمِ الْكَبِيرِ. So this person who studied very little, now he has a smattering of knowledge, and he doesn't have much knowledge, but he thinks that whatever he finds objectionable, whatever he cannot understand, that the alim, the big alim, also cannot understand. Whatever I object to, it doesn't make sense to me. So obviously it doesn't make sense to everybody else too. So even the big scholar, he's not ready to listen to the answer from the big scholar. He just look, this doesn't make sense to me. And no matter what you say, it doesn't make sense to you either. So you're telling the sheikh that you don't know what you're talking about, basically. فإذا لم يتفكر هذا القدر فإذا لم يتفكر هذا القدر يكون سؤاله من الحماقة. And so if he isn't even able to reflect to this extent that, hey, maybe this is a difficult question for me. Maybe I have this confusion. Maybe this sheikh or sheikha does not have this confusion. Maybe they can help me. If he can't even see to that extent, then his question is foolishness. It's foolishness. فينبغي ألا يشتغل بجوابه لأن جواب الأحمق السكوت. He goes, then it is fitting that you should also not respond to a foolish person's questions. Rather, the appropriate response to a foolish person is to remain silent. Ignore it. Ignore it. So what is it? So do not respond. Their illness is foolishness. They spent very little time seeking knowledge. They get a little bit of it, and then they think that what he finds problematic is also problematic for a great scholar. A scholar should not be bothered to respond to them. The best answer to a fool is silence. And you see this as well. Sometimes people do learn a little bit, and then they become dismayed by something that doesn't make sense to them, or they get swayed by, this happens, you know where? People who enter into, may Allah save us and protect us, they enter into polemical debates with like non-Muslims and atheists and Christian missionaries or whatever it is. And then, you know, they knew a little bit of Islam, but they didn't study Islam properly. They just had some internet knowledge of Islam. Now they can't debate this other person online or whatever. They got into it. They can't debate this. So they lost. So they joined the other side. Or they become a kind of like reformist kind of warrior, you know, like, okay, this is what's wrong with Islam. And then they start opposing Muslims on any one point, you know, that doesn't fit in with their modern understanding of what should be, or they just go completely 180 and start to attack ulama. Oh, you know, you guys are all, you know, complicit with the global economic system, or you guys all support tyrants, or you guys all, you know, whatever. And so they start painting these very broad brushes and think they know Islam now. See, Allah says this, one ayah, and then all the rest of the deen, there's no context to it. So they ask questions now. They want to know the answer, but the foolishness with which they're asking the question, the way that their mind works, that doesn't even think that this person could have another opinion, they're not going to accept the answer anyways. They're just too lost in their own foolishness. Imam Ghazali is saying, don't bother with such a person. For example, or you have sometimes questions that people ask, people send questions that, like, why do you want to know this? What benefit is there to you in this? Because they kept on asking and asking and asking, and they finally got to the point where, this is why the Prophet ﷺ, it is narrated in Bukhari and Muslim that he said, people will continue asking and asking until they say, this is the creation of Allah. But who created Allah? Right? Let whoever experiences any portion of this doubt say, Amantu billah, I believe in Allah and His messengers, wa rusulihi. So the hadith is saying that people will continue to ask questions that are not beneficial. They get into things that are like, you know, why do you care about this? Why do you need to know this? Or it's such a detail, and it's just asking for the sake of asking. That's another thing you have. People just sending questions just for the sake of asking. They're just letting questions go. They're not thinking about this. Wait, is it a good question or a bad question? I have had teachers when I was younger. I won't say which teacher. You know, I asked a dumb question, and not like a dumb question where I really didn't know, but it's like, just think about it. And someone who's accustomed to, you know, especially if you want to try to show that you have a lot of questions and you ask a dumb question, sometimes a scholar will be like, did you like think before you asked that question? Just put it together. Like, what are you saying even for yourself? So, I mean, that is something where if you now get busy in like figuring out, like, I don't know, something like very, very, you know, where is the exact direction of this corner of the Kaaba pointing to, or something like that, you know, things that are not going to be beneficial to the person's practice at that time, you know, then at that point, the best thing to do is to stay silent and don't respond to them. Why? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to cure them of their foolishness, right? And neither you're going to spend time researching, and it's not going to do anything good for you. The Prophet ﷺ actually is reported that in Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ proscribed, meaning forbade, idle talk and asking too many questions and squandering wealth. At some point in time, did you know the Prophet ﷺ completely forbade his companions from asking questions? He just said, no more questions. And this is why the companions used to like when a desert Arab used to come from outside Medina, and they would ask like all these basic questions. Now here's the interesting thing. His own companions, the Prophet ﷺ, limited their questions. It wasn't like he was getting hounded by the companions to ask questions. He said, okay, no more questions. Meaning sometimes you have to stop a student right where they are and say, first understand the basics. And then practice on what you know. Don't start asking this and this and this and this. And like someone who hasn't studied, Alif Bata is already asking about like some, high level Nahu question or poetry. They haven't studied Nurul Idah and they want to go into the Hidayah, for example. It's not going to make sense. As someone just mentioned today, you answer a fiqh question for someone and then they send back a whole bunch of Arabic proofs, on WhatsApp. It's like, can you read this and summarize and tell me if that supports your answer? I'm like, you asked me a fiqh question. Now you're sending me a whole bunch of Arabic quotes. I'm like, if you can read that, then you summarize and ask me what is your objection. If you can't read the proof, don't ask me to read the proof to your objection that you don't even know and then confirm whether I'm right or wrong. That's an example of a question where you just have to say, no, I'm not doing that. And then the person will realize, oh, okay, fine, I shouldn't have done that. If you cannot read the proofs or handle the proofs, then you shouldn't be asking about them, for example. And that's different than a sincere question that comes gradually and But it's not even good for the seeker of knowledge to indulge that type of question to them, because then they lose focus of what's most important. وَالثَّالِث أَنْ يَكُونَ مُسْتَرْشِدًا. And the third type, where are we? So the third type is a person who seeks guidance. أَنْ يَكُونَ مُسْتَرْشِدًا وَكُلُّ مَا لَا يَفْهَمْ مِنْ كَلَامِ الْأَكَابِرِ يَحْمَلُ عَلَى قُصُورِ فَهْمِهِ. And he says, however, everything that person, they seek guidance, but anything that they don't understand from the words of the major scholars, the senior scholars, he interprets in the light of his limited understanding. So he interprets in his very narrow view. وَكَانَ سُؤَالُهُ لِلْإِسْتِفَادَةِ. However, excuse me, his question was actually for obtaining benefit. It was a sincere question. He had that question. However, لَكِنْ يَكُونُ بَلِيدًا لَا يُدْرِكَ الْحَقَائِقِ. But he does not have the level of intelligence. I mean, the word used is dim-witted, right? You don't put anybody down when you're talking to them, but sometimes they don't have the level of intelligence or understanding to be able to understand and grasp this question. فَلَا يَنْبَغِيَ الْإِشْتِغَالُ بِجَوَابِهِ أَيْضًا. And Imam Ghazali says that is the third type of person, that it is not fitting for you to get busy in trying to answer this person. Because answers, what they mean is not just a verbal answer. Sometimes it takes research. Sometimes to answer one question, you might be researching for hours and hours in the books, going into the books. Anybody who's done a research question will know it takes time. And so that time, that hours or days of your life could have been spent doing something else rather than addressing a person who's not going to understand the answer, right? So do not answer that person. كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, just like the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said. Actually, this is a narration that is ascribed to the collection of Daylami. It's a weak chain. So it is attributed that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said. Sorry, let's get into the slides here. So these are three types of people. And where are we? Yeah, it is narrated that the Prophet ﷺ is attributed to have said, we, the community of the prophets, نحن معاشر الأنبياء أمرنا أن نكلم الناس على قدر عقولهم. That we, the community of prophets, have been ordered to address people according to the extent of their intellects. Now, you can understand the meaning of that. Meaning prophets were told to speak to people according to their level of understanding. Because this is a weak chain narration, I'm going to bring the commentators bring two other narrations. Number one, Ali radiallahu anhu says, narrated by Imam Bukhari, speak to people about what they are familiar with, what they know. Would you like for Allah and His Messenger to be denied? I.e., if people heard something they hadn't heard before, or they couldn't understand, so they reject it? So don't go up to someone, who is, let's say, they just became Muslim, and they're like a hardcore vegetarian. And then you start telling them about like the meat eating habits of the Sahaba or something like that. It's like, and then you tell them something they can't handle at that time. And they reject Allah and His Messenger because they say, no, that's not true. Or, you go to people with a hadith, especially in modern times when you have all these other ideologies because of liberalism and modernity, quote unquote, and these types of things. And so you don't understand traditional values in some ways. So you'd say something to someone, they're not ready for it. They're still stuck in a very, very different paradigm. And then because they say, no, that hadith couldn't be true, or something like that. Why? Because it's not in the spirit of, it's not modern, and it's not this, and it's not that. So our Prophet couldn't have said it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Ali is saying, do not tell people things that they're going to deny. Just tell them things that they know and understand. This is very important in our time especially. And Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, you never speak to a group of people about something that their intellects cannot understand, except that some of what you say is a fitna for some of them. Fitna, I didn't translate that, meaning you talk about something to people that they can't understand it. It becomes a fitna for them. So people who, for example, let's say you have some, often like young Muslims coming out of a very rough and tough neighborhood, in a situation where they're like, let's say former gang members, still kind of might be on like at-risk youth. Violence is like something that was maybe they were around. And then you're going to give them a bunch of narrations about about war and about fighting and about this and about that, because that's going to make a fitna for some of those people and lead them down a deviant path. Another example, for example, of like, you wouldn't tell children certain things they're not ready to hear, right? So this is an example of someone who wants to ask a question, but they just want to understand the answer. So like, I remember, for example, my child once asked me, Baba, where's Allah? I was like, I was like, how do I answer that question, right? It's not exactly what Imam Ghazali is talking about, but it's the same idea that whatever you say now they're going to interpret it in their limited understanding. So I remember another father, a scholar, who answered this question for their child. They said, and you're trying to say Allah's not confined to a place. Allah, is above. He created the heavens and the earth and time and space. And all of a sudden it's like, so Baba, you're saying Allah is a smiling cloud, a happy cloud? Or is He like a floating around? So this is the type of things that you're going to start leading them down. And when I asked my Shaykh, how do I answer this question? SubhanAllah, he says, just tell him He is with you wherever you are. I was like, SubhanAllah. My Aqidah student mind was trying to theologize the answer to my child. And the Shaykh just said, no, that's not the answer you give at that time. You just say, Allah is with you wherever you are. Then after that, the way that Aqidah, when you study Aqidah and you grow older, you start realizing, oh, okay, fine. Because you lead them away from the anthropomorphic view, but you also don't bring them down deep theology, or even essential theology when they're not ready for it. So this is what Imam Ghazali is trying to say. You don't bring things up to people that they're not ready to understand, right? وَأَمَّا الْمَرَض الَّذِي يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ. Now, as for the going back to the first type, so he mentions the three, then he goes back to the first type. Who is that? The person who responds to treatment. Meaning they're the person who accepts your answer. فَهُوَ أَنْ يَكُونُ مُسْتَرْشِدًا عَاقِلًا فَاهِمًا. That person is a type of person, they must be seeking guidance. Like, how do you know if they're the ones that you should spend your time to answer? Number one, they must be seeking guidance. They want to know the right path. They're sincere. عَاقِلًا, they have intellect. فَاهِمًا, and they're understanding. They get it. لا يكون مغلوب الحسد والغضب وحب الشهوة والجاه والمال. They are not overcome by envy or anger or love of desires or glory or wealth, but they are seeking the straight path. So how do you know this? Like someone comes up to you and, love of desires, for example, someone comes up to you, Shaykh, is it, can I get married, without my parents, and the two witnesses are like two people at a grocery counter, and I just said like, it's like, well, you want to answer that question, that person has some agenda there, so you have to kind of take it back, So somebody who's asking something in order to get something, from you. And this happens all the time as well. And this is something that our ustad as well warned us about. In Ifta, my ustad warned us about this. That he said that people are going to come to you and they know what they want to hear from you. So they're going to line up the question in such a way that you give the fatwa in their favor. Already they're going to start doing this. They're not asking you sometimes, what's the thing? They're coming to the mufti and they're saying, if this person said this, then I said this, and they should do this. And so what's the answer? And the answer points back to them being right, that person being wrong. That's how, if it's a court case, for example, so that person has a love of desire or glory or wealth. A person, a businessman is trying to find out how they can avoid paying zakat. And how can I give away my money in this way and convert it to this and convert it to that and avoid paying a zakat? And then you're actually just giving them a hila, a legal stratagem or a trick. So this type of person, that's not the type of person you want to be answering that question for. Like, here, let me find a trick for you to secretly marry this person or get out of zakat in this, or eat something haram, do something haram. No, that's not the type of person. Then Imam Ghazali continues. So that person has to be free of those things. And neither are they asking for jah. Jah is glory. They must be understanding. They're not overcome by envy, anger, love of desires, glory, or wealth. Glory meaning they're just asking to seem popular or to take your answer and say, look, I got this answer from so-and-so. So Imam Ghazali is saying that's not the type of person. Rather, يَكُونُ طَالِبَ الطَّرِيقَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Rather, they should be seeking a straight path, right? They're sincere. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ سُؤَالُهُ وَاعْتِرَاضُهُ عَنْ حَسَدٍ وَتَعَنُّتٍ وَامْتِحَانٍ. And their questions and objections are not from envy, obstinacy, or testing you. What does that mean? First of all, it says something interesting. Their question and i'tirad, their objections. What does that mean? You can bring an objection to a scholar. So you may have a question and they may answer you. And it's not wrong if you're sincere and you say, but Ustad, I don't understand this. But what about this? But what about that? So as long as it's in a polite way, it's not in a rude way, or in a way that's putting down, it's bad adab, or it's out of bad ill will, then even to have i'tirad, like an objection to something, people came to the Prophet ﷺ and objected about things. Women came to him, said, Ya Rasulullah, the men go out and they do this, they get this reward. What do we get? The poor came to the Prophet ﷺ, the poor migrants said, the people who have money, Ya Rasulullah, have run away with all the good deeds. They give sadaqah. We don't have anything. So you can come with questions and even an objection that is sincere. However, not from obstinacy, not from just trying to one up and argue. So you see this as well. Someone asks you a question. You answer the question. And they go, well, what about this? And you go, well, what about that? And they've just got a bunch of copy pastes from some polemical website. They're just giving you the next one, the next one, the next one. Okay, as my ustad once said, they're quoting from books. Do they even know what the color of the cover of those books look like? No. So this is obstinacy or testing you. And this is not something you ask questions to do. Someone's just saying, this is like a test question. They just want to know, they just want to expose something about you to get other people angry or to embarrass you. This is testing, or they're just testing to see, are you really smart? So what does this mean? And if you say, I don't know, then see, you don't know. That's what they're doing. So that's not the type of person you should be answering. So he's clearing out everything from the slate. And then he's saying, وَهَذَا يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ. This is a type of person that will take a treatment, who doesn't have any of those other hidden agendas. فَيَجُوزُ أَن تَشْتَغِلْ بِجَوَابِ سُؤَالِهِ. Then it is permissible for you to busy yourself in responding to this person's questions. بل يجب عليك إجابته. Rather, it is wajib upon you to answer this person. It is obligatory on you to answer this person, right? And this is what we'll end with. But he says something, this is very interesting. So out of the 4 different types of people who have the disease of ignorance, 4 different types of questioners, 3 of those questioners are not even worthy of giving an answer to. The person who has envy or hate for you, and they're just asking because of that. The person who's foolish and cannot understand, and the other one who will misinterpret what you say no matter what you say, right? Or who's testing you, or there's a number of things. Then the one person who will is the one who's sincerely seeking the answer. They can handle the question and they're asking to benefit themselves for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Imam Ghazali, he goes, it's permissible to answer? No, it is obligatory. And this is why as well, do you see how important it is to have a service where you can answer people's questions? You know, I'll tell you something. I learned something a long time ago. I had learned this from Shaykh Faraz. May Allah preserve him. You know, when I was a student, what is it called, TA? You know, he was training us in how to answer some of the questions. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless him. And you know, you take too long to answer something. You know, you just take it for a long time. And he actually said this is criminal type of criminal negligence. And he said, why? Because someone in their deen doesn't know something, and they need help, and they're waiting on you to answer a question. And you're not answering. It's obligatory for you. If you put yourself in that position and you can answer the question, you should get them the answer, or excuse yourself and say, I'm sorry, I can't do it. But I learned a lesson that day. This is many years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, 10 years ago. And this is why it's something that's so important, that when someone asks you a question they don't know, their deen. It's different if they're asking a question that's like a detail that, look, this is not the priority right now. Someone comes to you with a serious aqidah question. They have a doubt. This is not the time to tell the person, don't worry about it, have an ice cream, it'll be okay, I'll tell you tomorrow, or something like that. No, you try to answer the question. So they ask you, my prayer, I don't know if it's valid or not. Can you help me with this? You know, unless the person has some waswasa or something, that's a different story. But you know, you should try to answer their question. This is why it's so important as well to support. And this is just a tangent I'm taking, but this is why it's so important to support the idea of an answer service wherever you see that. Whether it's a Darul Ifta, Dairatul Ifta, in some countries they have that. Seekers has an answer service as well. There are people out there who have freed themselves up to answer questions, and organizations that have made it their job to try to cure people of this ignorance. And it's very important for all of us to support it in whichever way that we can, right? Whether it is through seeking answers and increasing an answer bank, or whether it is to refer other people to them, whether it is to financially support, or whether it is to answer questions and help research, or volunteer in any way. There's so many things you can do to volunteer and help scholars, whether in person or online, in doing their research, right? It's even helpful. SubhanAllah. Scholars need to know, if you're a specialist in your field, let's say you're a doctor, let's say you're a lawyer, let's say you're a food specialist, whatever it is, chemical engineer, there could be questions, religious questions that come up that you have a technical understanding of that could benefit a scholar in their religious answer. And so you should also try to get in touch with scholars if you can, and benefit them with if you have a perspective on something, and let them reach out to you, or just say, look, if you have any questions on this, please let me know. I can help you answer that question. Whether it's like a fiqh ruling on divorce and you want to look at family law and you're a lawyer, or a doctor who's talking about what's the ingredient in some type of medicine. So this is all the society has to work together to answer questions that people have, to cure people of ignorance. Inshallah. So we'll stop right there, and we're taking a little bit less because we're coming to the end of the term. So there are 2 more classes left. Inshallah. Are there any questions in person or on the forum? If there are any questions, we can take them up. Anybody say anything of note?
Someone's asking, how do you control your repetitive, stressful thoughts which lead to permanent depression which never goes away?
How do you lead to stressful thoughts which leads to depression that doesn't go away? In reality, if it's something that is like debilitating or harmful to one, then they should seek professional help for that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's again one of the avenues that Allah has created for us to do that. So seeking that. Also just trying to, from the advice that I've heard from people who are very knowledgeable about these subjects, is to, just improve one's overall mental health and physical health, whether it's through things like a balanced diet, sleeping right, socializing with other people, getting off of excess time on the screen, watching what they consume, getting away from negative things on viewing negative things, getting exercise, sunlight, vitamin D, having a good diet, sleeping proper times. These are all things that will help someone in negative, who have kind of negative thought processes. However, I'm not a doctor and I don't claim to be one, or a therapist. So these are things that you can do. Reading Quran. Quran is a shifa for the hearts. Doing salawat of the Prophet ﷺ, and trying to do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the spiritual side of things that a person can consult someone and get something for them to kind of work on and feel good about through that side. However, if it's something that's kind of chronic or serious and detrimental to one's daily life, then they should also go down a professional route just to make sure that they've cleared up everything. But there are things that you can do for yourself before you go to that as well, inshallah. Any other questions? Yeah, tafadhal. That's a very good question. How does a scholar differentiate between a person who's ignorant and worth their time? So the scholar, remember, we have to do, in general, there's a concept in our deen called husn al-dhann bil muslimin. We have to think well, right, of other people. We have to think well of them. And anytime someone comes to you with a question, right, the suspicion should not be in the mind that, oh, this person's probably not sincere or like that. So this is why as well, for people who are answering questions, or teachers or da'is or scholars, a lot of their time gets spent just sorting out this type of thing, where you're just listening to the question. And because remember, in the past, most questions were either spoken but also written by letters, right? So they didn't have like email and like instant messaging and stuff like that. So you'd get letters from other places and you would write answers and then send them back, or someone would come up to you in a masjid and ask a question. So this type of thing is that you have to wait until that person reveals a bit more about themselves. So you should never judge a person, and you have to be careful, because sometimes a message may come in by an email or something like that, and you don't know the context to it. So you are not sure, is this person asking just to are they joking? Are they just like kind of just saying it to, and some people do ask questions just to joke around. And are they really serious? So you have to look at the question, and does the question itself merit a response? You have to look at who's the person asking, if there's any way to find out about them, where are they coming from, what's going on. I mean, if a person is a very small child compared to if they're like a mature person, then the way that you answer will be different too. So you need to know hal al-mustafti, the condition of the person who is seeking the answer or the fatwa. That also makes a difference. And then the context, the siyaq, also depends. So if you're like in a situation where you're surrounded by, you go to pray in like another masjid, you're surrounded by a bunch of guys who are all laughing and looking down on you, and someone tells you, like, it throws a test question out at you. It happens sometimes, like, okay, and it used to happen back in the day. I don't think it happens anymore, but that could happen. So then you would know from the context that this is probably not the best thing to get involved with. But otherwise, you're right. There's sometimes you can't tell, and it takes time to know. Now, there are some very experienced scholars that I've seen, one of my ustads, who could just see a question come in, and after like 20, 30, 40, 50 years of answering people's questions, they could just get like a kind of malaka, meaning like a kind of like a feeling in their heart. This person is trying to get this answer from you, right? Don't answer the question in this way. Or they'll say, answer in a very diplomatic way, and like this. Or they'll say something like, be careful about this. And that takes a lot of experience, but you can't assume without knowing. Any other questions?
This question, how to advise someone who misses their salah due to overwashing?
So that is a problem of misgivings or OCD, perhaps, and that type of person should stick only to the sunnah, have somebody else watch them and limit how much they wash, or go to the masjid and see what everybody else is doing, copy them and do no more, even if it feels like it's not done. And just stick with the sunnah and limit themselves. And then this was one way to overcome that. But if the problem is so great that they're not able to overcome it, then they should seek professional counseling or help for OCD, waswasa, or similar. But the way is to stick to the sunnah, do not do any more, and know that this is about the mercy of Allah, not about you doing things perfectly or correctly. If you think that, Imam Ahmad Zarruq said that the way to deal with waswasa is actually to stop caring about this idea that you're not going to get it perfect because it's from shaitan. Once you've done the sunnah, that's the limit. So we don't wash more than, even 3 times. You don't have to keep vigorously rubbing. You wash, you rub the first time, then 3 times you wash, and that's it. And the amount of water the Prophet ﷺ used was like this much for wudu, like something like, And so once you know you're going beyond that, or like too much beyond that, then you should know that this is from the shaitan and you're following shaitan now. Or it's from pride. You think that I know better and the sunnah is not enough. Or it could also be obstinacy, where you think that I haven't done it. I'm the one whose deeds, my actions are going to make a difference on Allah accepting. Whereas Allah doesn't need you washing 10 times to accept your prayer. And Allah told you there's a limit because Allah knows that. And it's by Allah's mercy that our deeds are accepted, not by necessarily the validity of our actions, according to Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi. Any other questions? But that type of question has to have some treatment involved, usually. Do you have any questions? Okay. Jazakumullah khairan wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.